Welcome back to another episode of Can We Talk? This week we'll be talking about gun control. Let's jump right in and meet the panel. We have a great panel with us here today. So let's go around and share your name and a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Hi, I'm Jocelyn. I am a wife, a mom, and a business office manager.
Hi, my name is Chris. I work in full-time ministry here at InspireChurch, and I'm a husband, soon-to-be father in November.
Hi, my name's Dave, and I'm been a member of the church for about 14 years. Married, and we're going to celebrate 19 years in July.
Hi, I'm Michelle. I work in accounting, and I'm an intern here at InspireChurch.
All right. Well, welcome, everyone. Very excited for tonight. Our topic, again, is gun control. So I'm going to throw out a question, and anybody can jump in, and we'll just go with the flow and see where it takes us. So the first question is this. What is your definition of gun control?
All right, I'll start. So I've been a long-time gun owner, probably since maybe I've been around guns since I was 5 years old. And I was with guns long before they had gun control. And then I watched it, I guess, change into having gun control. I'm originally from California. In the beginning, it was just maybe registering handguns, not even rifles. And there was no age limits. There wasn't anything about how it is now. When I look at how it is here in Hawaii, our gun control here is very restrictive. And there's probably some good reasons for some of that. I don't agree with everything, but there is some things that I do find in line with.
I think for me, I'm not personally experienced with firearms. I don't think I've ever fired a gun in my life, maybe not even held one. But for me, when I think of gun control, I think of one, the policies and procedures and the laws around carrying a firearm, but I also think about how you actually use the firearm as a person who is carrying it, you know. So I think it's a two-parter. One is like the legal, logistic, black and white things, and the other is, how, I guess, responsible are you with the gun that you have?
I grew up with my dad having a lot of firearms, and it was a natural thing, and he wasn't using the guns as weapons, but it was for recreation and hunting. So that's my history with guns. But for current times, I feel like gun control would eliminate the guns or weapons or firearms getting into the hands of people who are using it as weapons in criminal activity.
Well, for me, I grew up around guns. My dad it was always a hobby of his. So for me, I was always like around it and very comfortable around it. For me, I think gun control is kind of like what Jocelyn said. It's just like trying to keep it out of the hands of the wrong people.
Mm-hmm. So does any of you know the current laws when it comes to the state of Hawaii and handguns and long rifle?
Where do you want me to start?
Give us some bullet points, at least give us three.
For handguns, you have to be 21 years of age. That's number one. You have to have had a safety class taught by an NRA instructor. You have to go through a complete background investigation before you can even own any kind of firearm, whether it's a long gun or a handgun. And when I mean background investigation, I don't mean just criminally. It's now medically, psychologically, everything. And so it's not an easy task to go through that. And then there's a 14-day waiting period while they're checking that out just to make sure And you can't have any TROs. You can't even have misdemeanors. It's pretty much restrictive.
Okay.
So can I add a caveat to that?
Yeah.
I worked several years in law enforcement, whether directly or indirectly. And personally, and this is anecdotal, 90%, 85, 90% of your criminals, they're not the ones who legally own guns.
Mm-hmm.
They got them illegally, whether they stole it or they bought it illegally. And so sometimes I think gun control inhibits the legal person from being able to do the right things.
So with that being said, who should be able to own a firearm?
I think law-abiding citizens, and by that I mean like people who don't have any kind of criminal history at all. So I feel like the laws that we have here, in a way it's good, but then again it gets tiresome because you're waiting for so long just to be able to get like what you want, just to enjoy like your hobby.
Yeah.
I really do believe in the freedom of anyone having a pathway to gun ownership, especially for, protection of the family, recreation, hunting, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But I do believe that there needs to be safeguards in place to make it more difficult for those who will want to use them either in criminal activity or, as we've kind of seen in our country over the past few years, in these, mass shootings, things of that nature. I think that's the issue that I see most prevalent in, our media and everything like that. But I do believe on like more of a personal day-to-day thing. If you want to have a gun and you can have access to the proper training, the proper safeguards and accountability for that, then I think absolutely you should have that choice.
I heard a common thread with everything, and I want to throw this out. Do you believe someone's experience, whether it's good or bad, affects their opinion today about gun control? Has anybody had a good experience or a bad experience that causes them to have an opinion that may be different from another person?
I think for me, because when I was growing up, because my dad already had this hobby, from a very, very young age, if I wanted to like experience like going to the range, then he would allow me, he would let me go out to the range and do that. And he would tell me like, okay, this is how you shoot a gun. This is the proper way to do it. Like, don't put your finger on the trigger, like very basic stuff. And whenever I had, like the want to go to the range, like he wouldn't tell me no. He would let me experience it and get like all the experience out. And I think because of that, with the way that my dad had handled with me growing up around it and being comfortable around it and knowing that it's not the gun, it's like the person that's holding it. Like that's why I have the views that I have about gun laws and like being able to own one and being okay around it.
I had a bad experience. My freshman year of college, there was actually a shooting on my campus. One student was killed, and 2 were injured. And the shooter was someone who was documented as mentally ill, off his medication, fixated on the Columbine shooting, and basically wanted to recreate that, and got a hold of a shotgun and had no ties to the school at all, just found a school and came onto campus with ill intent. It was definitely a very tragic experience. Thankfully, we had security that was able to step in and prevent much more loss of life. But it was definitely very deeply impacting to me just to see how, where I'm kind of definitely it made me more on the middle, I would say, on this issue. Because on one hand, that shows me that this experience does inform that there's work to be done. There's an issue here. But on the other hand, I also know, well, it also had a lot to do with who the person was who was holding the gun as well. But that was definitely an experience that caused me to really think hard about what I believe in. Just seeing, how much it can change an entire community in the blink of an eye was definitely sobering for sure.
What do you think could be done when it comes to reducing gun violence?
That's kind of a tough question. I came here thinking about that myself because, we want to have gun control so the evil people don't get it. But then how do you stop them from getting it? Because they're not getting it legally. So if we have a restriction on who can get a gun, but they're just getting their guns anyway and not through the proper channels, then how do you stop that? I don't actually have an answer. I was thinking that same thing because, we can talk about mental illness and that we need more mental health care. But I think really actually when you said, how do you stop these people? I mean, I think the first and foremost is for us as Christians is that we pray for our country, we pray for our people, we pray for our nation. And really, is it like an outreach? Go to the communities who have problems. Do we outreach to them and try and reach them, give them Jesus? I know Jesus is the answer, but, what steps do we do? It's just the continue evangelism.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good point when it comes to, relying on our faith, who Jesus is, and preaching the gospel. I would see how that could be difficult, writing that into a legislative law.
Yeah.
So you touched a point that everybody can relate to from different sides of opinions, and it's mental illness. Do you believe that mental illness is the biggest factor when it comes to gun violence?
No.
Okay.
I'll back that up because we have to understand that the ones that, like you were talking about earlier, the mass shootings, right? So that's more your mental illness type person. The number of actual crimes committed in that aspect is a very small margin of the actual criminal activity that happens with guns. Your largest contingent of criminal activity with guns happens because of gang violence, right? So that's more of a social issue. Alcohol and drug use, right? Especially drug dealing, right? And now human trafficking plays a big role in that too. So that has nothing to do with mental illness as opposed to more social ramifications. And a lot of those people, we can go to them with talking about the Bible and stuff like that. But I would say a lot of them are not going to listen to us that closely. Victory Outreach has done a lot with that population, but they can't do it by themselves. And I think maybe the church as a whole has kind of missed that mark. I grew up in Los Angeles, so my grandmother lived in East LA. So going back to one of your earlier questions about who should own a gun, I used to think I should own a gun because people would do drive-bys with fully automatic weapons, and we'd hear spray, and we're all hitting the floor until it stops, right? Any of us that grew up in those kinds of neighborhoods would understand that.
Yeah.
And that's not a mental illness thing. Well, yeah, maybe it is, but not in the same context as some guy going into a school and shooting a bunch of young children.
Yeah.
Do you understand? When I hear that kind of stuff, I truly believe that that's demonic and possession and all that's going on. When I think of the gang violence, I think more of like the Old Testament with Joshua and him having to go in and eliminate an entire society because they're doing evil before man, right? And I think the answer is so complicated. That's why we're having so much problems here in America. And it's funny because they talk about the United States is the one place for all this gun violence, but that's not true. It's happening in South America. It's happening in Africa. It's happening in Asia. So it's not just us. Sometimes I get really sick of hearing it's only in America. It's not. It's happening everywhere.
Yeah.
And, I just look at it, we're in the end times.
I'll make this statement. Guns don't kill people. People do. What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, it's true because when someone dies, you can use any form of weapon or even your own hands. So if you have the intent to kill, see, I'm thinking of like the criminal, not self-defense. But if you have the intent to kill, then you find whatever in front of you, a pen, a bottle.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it is true. It's not just the guns that are killing people.
Yeah, I would say the same. I think it's really a tool that can be used, to provide, to protect, or can be used to take life, to instill fear. So I believe that statement overall is true, that it really is about the person's intent and how they use it.
I agree.
How are mass shootings different than any other gun violence?
I think mass, this is the way that I'm interpreting the question, is where like mass shootings are broadcasted more, like on the news. Whereas like, I guess like petty crimes, like if somebody robbed like a gas station with a gun, like it's just like another thing that just happens. I think it just has more attention.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah, I think it definitely the attention, but I think it's the intention because it highlights something that is so uncharacteristic even for human beings to accept. Like, we've even come to the place or a culture where it's like, oh yeah, guys, held up a gas station. Okay. Which I think shows another issue probably in our culture. But when we see someone going into a school and, with children and all these things, it's to the point where it's so, out there and such a grand scale and something that is just beyond, what we see. It's not something we see portrayed in films or video games or anything. It's just, it's just a different kind of category almost. I think that does catch the attention of a wide net of people, which is one reason why it's so, spread throughout social media and news and everything.
Yeah.
I would say the mass shooting it triggers people because it's so senseless. If you have an issue against this person and you want to kill them, you just kill that person. I mean, if that was your intention. But to go and kill innocent people for no reason, I mean, they have a reason, but, for no apparent reason, then I think that's just a senseless. So, but what she said, then that is more sensationalized.
Yeah. Here's another question for you. Does media gun violence affect actual gun violence?
Media like movies?
Yeah.
Oh.
I think also, and I might be wrong, but movies, games,
games.
does that affect actual gun violence?
As a therapist, if you look at the statistics, it'll tell you no, right? Can it make us more, I don't want to say the word numb, but
Like desensitized.
right,
That's a great
desensitized to
word.
doing that? I would say yes.
Okay. Yeah. How about you, Michelle?
I feel like in a way, like I don't know the numbers or anything, but I guess like when they talk about like these people who have done mass shootings, it was always, well, not always, but they kind of did it almost like mimicking what somebody else did, like at your school. You know, they tried to mimic, was it Columbine?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I feel like some of them may try to mimic like, you know, video games or what happened in like a movie. And yeah, and that way it's like sensationalized from there too.
Yeah, I think definitely with Dave, your point about, you know, I've seen an instance of someone who's, you know, been affected so much that they, you know, went and did a shooting themselves. But I think that's still a minority. And I think the majority of us, whether it's movie or whatever it is truly, I think the biggest effect is the desensitization. You know, where at times it can be even just too hard to, you know, see when something else like that on the news happens. And you're just like, for me, when I see a shooting pop up on the news, sometimes I'm like, okay, I just need a minute before I can really engage with this, you know, today. And I think that's a reality for many of us now, which is a tragedy in and of itself, that we're not even able to fully confront the reality because it's such an ongoing onslaught of the stimulus of seeing it over and over and over again. It can either make us numb or make it to the point where it's just overwhelming.
Well said. You know, I want to thank each and every one of you for coming because the discussion was very amazing. And your thoughts and opinions are well-deserved. And it shows the audience really how Christians can respond to difficult and sometimes controversial topics with great respect to one another. So I want to thank everybody for joining us in this episode of Can We Talk?
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Can We Talk? We had a great conversation.
We would love to continue this conversation with you. Click to connect on the link in the description. We would love to connect with you.
Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a comment for a topic you'd like to see. And we'll see you in the next episode.